Joining me today is one of the most respected individuals in the solar industry, Yann Brandt. Yann spends countless hours every year researching renewable energy trends, technology, and legislation to provide SolarWakeup subscribers with the best possible news that the solar industry has to offer. Yann, thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be here, Nick.
Wonderful. So I have to ask you, why solar? And the reason I ask that is it's still such a young industry, and I'm always curious to hear why people got involved in it. Was this something that you wanted to be in when you were a child? Did it happen later in life? Tell us why solar.
Well, the short answer would be because Al Gore was my commencement speaker in '05. But, you know, if that's not the motive, it really comes down to an accidental meeting with an architect and shortly thereafter.
Okay, so now I'm already interested. So Al Gore was your speaker in 2005. Was this high school, college? Tell us a little bit about the speech and what piqued your interest.
Yeah, it was college, and for those that heard Al Gore give his speeches back in the middle of the decade there, he was talking about climate change, and there's a story about a Shoney's in Tennessee, real political speech, real skilled politician speech. But he was talking about climate change in a way that most college seniors really weren't that interested in. But he stuck with it, and this is right when his first documentary that he won the Oscar for was coming out. That in itself didn't really spark any firm interest in it. I went back to Florida after college, which is where I was from. And I was working for a roofing company that had Florida had just gone through two massive hurricanes in 2005. One of them was Hurricane Katrina, and a good friend of mine was running a roofing contracting company. I was an engineer, and the two things kind of matched up, and that's where I went to work. So my first job out of college was actually solving the effects or mitigating the damage caused by climate change to those two hurricanes.
Okay, so, and this was right around the same time, I believe, that the Inconvenient Truth documentary came out as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
He did, yeah. So you're doing cleanup in the wake of the hurricanes coming through, and you kind of stumbled into it. That's super cool. So we'll fast forward a little bit. We're all big fans of the SolarWakeup. So you got your feet wet in the solar industry. You obviously know it better than most. Why did you start the SolarWakeup? I mean, how did that come about? I'm really curious what prompted you to do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. And it's funny that you brought up the Inconvenient Truth, because the funny thing is I've actually never seen the movie, which, maybe through quarantine time, it should be something on my list. But SolarWakeup started just around 9 years ago. Mid-September is going to be our 9-year anniversary.
Congrats.
And thank you. The interesting thing about being in solar in 2006, 2007 is that oftentimes you're the only one doing it. And I was doing an interview with Charlie Crist for a fundraiser. He's a congressman, former governor of Florida, the other day, and he's now a Democrat and in Congress. But when he was a governor, he was a Republican, and there's this bipartisan aspect of climate change. Him and Arnold Schwarzenegger were both governors. They were hosting these climate change summits. So I kind of was in the circuit of solar speakers at climate change events, and I had the good fortune of traveling in these circles of really big names. And when I left the first company that I worked for, I did a startup, and this isn't some entrepreneurial nuance, but my office had no windows. So I went home one day and I said to my wife, I said, everyone's going to forget who I am if I'm sitting in this windowless office. I remember saying those exact words. And so the kind of idea of a newsletter wasn't original. There used to be the solar newsletter called Solar Buzz, which really just reframed press releases on a daily basis. And I said, someone should write it about the actual news in this industry. And my wife looked at me and she said, "You should do that." And so she gets all the credit for SolarWakeup.
Oh, nice.
Which she still regrets to a certain degree now that I'm sitting with my computer on my lap most evenings. But the first edition went out to like 40 or 50 people, close friends, and it's grown ever since.
So that's a perfect segue into my next question to you is, why do you think it became so popular? Because it stuck. And I'll tell you right now, like even in our morning meetings, we'll pull up some of your data and use it strategically when we do some of our planning and looking to the future and growing our business. Why do you think your newsletter stuck with so many people and has just continued to become more popular?
Yeah, I get asked this, is probably the most common question of, why I do it or why it's popular. And part of it is it was never a job, right? I have a day job, and that surprises most people in the solar industry, is that SolarWakeup isn't my job. But because it was never meant to be monetized as a news outlet or advertiser based, I kind of just wrote what I thought. Right. And it used to be, over the 9 years, there's been different variations of, I've grown as a person. I used to try to, I wouldn't say pick fights, but I was a little adversarial. There was moments where I was just kind of covering the news, but it's an opinion, right? And it ends up being this is the top news stories, which, I think most people could get on their own. But at the same time, I'm giving people a 60-second version of what the news are and what I think about it. And that helps most executives in a one-directional approach. They don't have to agree with me, but it at least makes them wonder, what does someone else think about what's happening every single day? And I think that's where the helpful piece about it is. And I think that's why people tend to stay subscribed. Don't get me wrong, people disagree with me to the point where they say I'm going to unsubscribe, which is always my that's the price of entry, right? I get to say what I want, and you get to unsubscribe whenever you want, and that's the price that we share in this relationship. But the opinion piece is probably why it's different than the daily news digest that the actual publications that do really good work put out, because for them it's a little bit different than what it is that I do. Yeah,
and that's understandable. But I will say that a lot of your news too is very heavily data driven, right? You provide a lot of facts with your opinion, and it makes your opinion that much more credible, in my opinion. I can't speak for all of your other subscribers, but we trust what you say on the GreenLancer's side of things. So we really do appreciate what you're doing and putting out there.
I appreciate that.
So
yeah, the data is, look, this is where the gray line, the blurred area between my day job and SolarWakeup happen, right? Because everything I do in my day job is it feeds into what it is that I'm writing into. But everything that I do in my day job is not anything I write about, right? So when I have conversations with business partners or things of that nature, I'm very strict about, those are confidential conversations, but they feed my opinion and they adjust my market dynamic, and hence sort of the real time changes that you've seen in the data that I write about because of what I actually live through every day.
Well, perspective is everything. So you've got the perspective when you do the research from the, above, looking down on everything, but then you're actually in the nitty gritty, getting your hands dirty, seeing what's going on at a closer level. So again, I think that perspective just adds to your credibility when you go through and cover some of these topics. It really is awesome. I know that you've got limited time here and we want to be respectful of it, but you've been on the solar coaster for quite some time now. So it's 2020. Where do you see us being by 2030? What type of obstacles are we going to have to get through? Is it legislative? Is it technology? Where do you want things to be, and what's going to be getting in our way?
Well, the politics always get in our way, and it's where we're still the most immature as a market. Most solar companies don't view politics as something that they have to do. Some do, but most don't. And until we realize that we have to play the political game. It doesn't need to be a partisan game, but it does have to be political, and people, companies' budgets should reflect the fact that we live, work, and profit from a heavily regulated and politicized industry with trillions of dollars of investments already in place and at the risk of being, stranded assets, if you will. If you look at sort of fossil generation, the industry is going to thrive, right? And we did a market update call just this morning where we talked about what happens if the ITC goes away, which there's so many different variables that impact our market. But here's my 3 hopes in the world of where I think we should be in at least the next couple of years, and definitely in the next 10 years. We're going to create new price signals for all types of solar that we're engaged in, right? So whether it's residential rooftop, C&I, or utility scale, it's not just going to be a 20-year PPA for a fixed price. And it's not just going to be net metering or some function thereof. It's going to be demand response based, shifting energy to a different time with energy storage, helping, giving additional pricing signals that can be contracted, but can also be taken advantage of in real time for the homeowners that are willing to do certain things like, shut off their air conditioning or something along those lines, because the demand behavior needs to be adjustable, and therefore the residential kind of load factor of generation can also be adjustable. What's also going to happen is we're really going to focus on the digitization of the market, right? So you're doing it on the permitting side. There's efforts to then help you standardize that so that you don't have to deal with every jurisdiction differently, but also on the sales and planning side, that'll all digitize.
Yeah, and I think that obviously things have gotten smoother even in the short time that I've been in the industry, which has been it's been about 4 years now, but I'd like to see things get smoother on all fronts. I'm just curious, Yann, recently we saw something about the SolarWakeup buyers group. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about it and what's to come in the following months here?
Yeah, this is when sort of my day job then gives me a good idea on the SolarWakeup side, which never got into monetization from a platform perspective, but recently because we've grown as large as we have, there was something that's been bothering me for quite some time, and that's the fact that solar installers, which are the lifeblood of this industry, they create the market for every manufacturer, every service provider, every lead gen company. If the installers aren't doing well, everything else kind of falls apart. And one of the things that has happened recently is everyone is making more and more money and creating a margin stack against the solar installer, which was bothering me both from a philosophical standpoint, but also from a sustainability of the market standpoint. So I created the SolarWakeup Buyers Group, which is essentially a buyers a group purchasing organization, which then allows individual installers that are too small to create leverage for purchasing on their own to get the kinds of prices that really large installers get and create leverage back to manufacturers, distributors, service providers, and just have a little bit of extra edge compared to where they are before, right? So what it looks like as a product is a really transparent view on pricing for all types of different things that they're buying already, and also gives them access to that in a variety of different channels. What we do, and our team at SolarWakeup does, is we try to find the lowest cost path or supply chain for each of the different product categories. And right now it's mostly hardware, modules, inverters, but that'll expand into all sorts of things. And it's really membership driven, and it creates transparency. So it allows them to negotiate a little bit smarter, but also have access to much lower prices and save 20-25% on a lot of the things that they were buying beforehand and losing that margin.
Right. That's Gosh, that's awesome. And that's actually similar to what we have here on the GreenLancer side, as we try to standardize the design and engineering services to just make it a price that you'd be getting if you were a large solar installer, or if you're just a startup roofer and you're doing your first solar project. So there's a lot of overlap there. So very, very cool, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time today to talk with me and just to hear the story of the guy behind the news that we've been following for such a long time. So for those of you who have not subscribed to the Solar Wake Up, please go to SolarWakeup.com. And Yann has helped us tremendously at GreenLancer. He's a great source of information, whether you're just a hobbyist into solar or if you're in it full time. There's always something to be learned, and the information that he puts out, it's top notch. So go check them out. Yann, thank you so much for being our guest today on the Solar Spotlight.
Nick, great to be here.